Good morning. Hang on, I can't hear you. One second.
No, it was me. I was on mute.
Okay.
I just check in to see if you were able to get in, but I see you are.
It's good to see you.
You too. How are you doing?
Good. It's been too long.
It has been a long time, but you're back now. Okay, so you're set up as host?
Yes, it's as
morning. Yeah. Good morning, Kanika. Don't talk, just stay there. I'm gonna be a Jodeci moment. Don't talk, just listen. Okay, well, I'm gonna hop back off into and go into ours. I just wanted to check, make sure all's good to go. If you guys need anything, just ping me. I have my phone right here with Teams open.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
See y'all later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Kanika, can you just give me a thumbs up? Hang on one second, actually. If you can see the slideshow or in the chat, either one is fine.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
We can also see the notes at the bottom though. Did you want that to show?
Like the what am I trying to say? The subtitles.
Oh, is it? Maybe. Okay. So I think it's just yeah. Okay. So how did you turn the subtitles on?
I think they were just on like with my settings is my guess.
Okay.
I can turn them off. I think I just don't know exactly.
It may be okay. Initially I thought it was the notes, like the presenter notes.
Yeah, no, yes, because it kind of looks like it. Yeah, I have the presenter notes on my side. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't showing the notes and the slides because I have two screens up. So
Got you. No, I think you're good.
okay, cool. Are you gonna hang out here also?
Yeah, I'll be here.
Perfect. So do you mind doing all the like monitoring like the chat and the letting people in and that kind of thing?
That's fine. What time do you want me to let them in?
What time is it? I don't have my watch on actually.
It's 9:24.
Well, why don't we let them in at 9:28?
Okay.
So we can see too. Because I know Brandon was talking about potentially having us combine.
Okay.
If we don't have very many, and I'm guessing right now we have, it looks like, let me see.
It says 4 people in the waiting room.
Also, my guess is if we don't get more than 10, probably to combine with Brandon.
Okay.
Sorry, I know you're sick, so don't talk more than you have to.
We have 6 in the waiting room.
Great. I think you can go ahead and let them in now.
Okay.
Even if we do end up switching, we can have them go ahead and get logged in to the
Okay.
attendance. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this Saturday. As you are logging in, I have a QR code up in front of us. I'm also going to put a link in the chat. This is so that you can log into your attendance this morning and get credit for our session today. So I'm going to put that link in the chat for you in just a moment. And you should be able to see it. Good morning, good morning. As you guys are logging in, go ahead and please turn on your cameras as you can, and so I can see your faces and know that you can hear me, and we can get started in just a moment. The login, oh, it looks like we have a couple people joining. The QR code in front of you is to log in for your attendance. I also put the link in the chat for you as well, and I can send it again for those of us who are just joining. Okay, good morning, Lena. It is great to see you. I see we have Veronica. If you don't mind renaming yourself so that some of you have a first initial and a last name. If you could rename yourself just so that I can see your full name so that when we chat and we can call on each other, that I know who I'm talking to. That'd be awesome. My name is Megan Hardy and I work for Tntp, and I will be leading our session today. There is a chance, I'm going to check in with my colleague in a moment, Brandon, who led your session last time. I'm going to check in with him in a moment because we might be pivoting slightly and combining the math sessions today. So just hang tight for a moment. I'm going to check in with him and see what our plan is moving forward for this morning. But go ahead, take some time to get logged in, get set up. Please make sure that you rename yourself to at least your first name, if not your first and last name, and go ahead and start getting those cameras on, please. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was muted. I do want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to go ahead and get us moving along. And as people join, we will get them logged into the session. And don't worry if you didn't get completely logged in already. We're going to have this QR code up at the end as well. So I feel free to use the chat during this time. I can't really see the chat during our session, but Kanika will be monitoring. My colleague Kanika will be monitoring the chat as we go. So if you do have a question, feel free to come off mute because I won't necessarily be able to see in the chat itself. So last time we were together, you guys worked with my colleague Brandon, and you talked a lot about planning your approach to diagnosing student learning. And we're going to come back on October 15th to focus on progress monitoring and data analysis. But together, we're coming together today on September 11th in the form of a just-in-time scaffold. So we take feedback really seriously here at TNTP, and we heard a lot of your concerns regarding providing more opportunities to dig into the how of the work instead of just the why. And so we're going to address the how really today. So we're going to have 3 hours together. We're going to deeply examine the work that's going to support your efforts to address that interrupted learning that we know everybody has experienced this year. We're going to look at some specific tools to facilitate accelerated learning in your own classrooms. So the 3 pieces that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to reconnect with the core tenets of accelerated learning. We're going to examine the 4 key resources identified in the opportunity myth and the Nmis to support accelerated learning. And we're going to apply these key takeaways from today's learning to strengthen the quality of an upcoming lesson or unit that you are actually teaching in a class. And these are just another example of the pieces that we're going to be looking at. When we're looking at the 4 key components in planning and instruction, we're going to be looking at growth mindset and high expectations, grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, and deep engagement, which I know you were all introduced to in our last sessions when we were talking about the opportunity myth, but we're going to go back to those and dig into them a little bit deeper today. A couple of norms before we get started. Please commit this morning to being fully present, engaging with a growth mindset, and engaging in the learning. When you are not sharing, please make sure your camera is on, but you are muted. And then please make sure that you know that we are recording this session, so it is going to be recorded to be shared out later. If you have questions, we absolutely want you to ask them. So feel free to ask them in the chat that Kanika is monitoring, but also just feel free to come off mute if there's a pause, and you are also always welcome to ask a question. That we want this to be an engaging session, not just you sitting. We want you to be able to participate. Are there any questions before we get started today? And if you just joined us, again, my name is Megan Hardy and I work for TNTP, and I'll be leading our elementary math session this morning. And I'm super excited to be working with Roswell ISD. I've so enjoyed working with New Mexico this last year. So you guys are an awesome group of educators. I'm really excited to be back with you today. Okay, so I want to spend some time this morning really looking at the difference between remediation and accelerated learning. And I know this is probably a graphic or at least information that you've seen previously. Oftentimes, we have found ourselves as educators focusing too much on remediation. And remediation, it focuses on drilling students on isolated skills that really bear little resemblance to the current curriculum that they're working in. And it doesn't really have connection to what they're truly working on in class at their grade level. The activities connect to standards from years ago, and they really have students aim to master content from years past rather than the content that they're working on now. As educators, we want to shift our focus from remediation to more accelerated learning, which is strategically preparing students for success in the current grade level content. And it does connect with past content, but always in approximation to what students need to learn to access the current grade level content. So we're going to dig into these a little bit more today, but I do want us to really stamp the difference between remediation and learning acceleration. So there's 3 key pieces to looking at accelerated learning. The first piece is understanding, second piece is diagnosing, and the third piece is taking action. And these are teacher moves that the teacher will be doing when they're thinking from a learning accelerated mindset. So the teacher needs to understand, first of all, grade level instruction. They need to know, what does it actually look like in practice for me to be teaching on grade level in a classroom? What is the content that we're going to be covered, the materials we're going to use, all of those pieces. Teachers have to have this basic understanding before they can move on to any kind of the other pieces of diagnosing, taking action, that sort of thing. So once we have a key understanding of what student learning is, or what student learning should look like, we're going to look at what students actually already know. So this is where we're going to do the diagnose piece. We need to actually diagnose students' understanding of those concepts. Do they have the prerequisite skills to understand what is happening? And when I want to be clear here that when we're talking about diagnosing, we're not necessarily talking about these big formal diagnostics that you might see like at the beginning of the year. We gather a lot of data, especially at the beginning of the year. We're not really talking about those. We're really talking more specifically about curriculum embedded, unit specific diagnostics and formative assessments here. So day to day, the diagnosing of how students are accessing the curriculum, not necessarily the overall. So I just want to make that quick differentiation there. And the final thing is, once you have understood the content, once you've diagnosed students' ability to understand the content as well, then we can take action. So this is where teachers can plan for and execute effective instructional practices. They can pair their own knowledge of content and students' knowledge of content to devise and execute meaningful systems that are going to support not just one student, but all students. So the next few slides, we're going to take a deeper look at what this actually looks like in practice. So remember how we said a moment ago, we were using this session as a just-in-time scaffold, okay? What do we mean by just-in-time? The difference between remediation and learning acceleration is given in an example here. So if you look at this slide here, in this scenario, the blocks that say A, B, C represent knowledge and skills from a prior grade level, okay? In remediation, oftentimes what would happen is that a teacher would block off large amounts of time to practice these strategies or these concepts before they would even engage students in grade level work. But I want you to look at the difference between what remediation looks like, where you're blocking those off, and what just in time looks like. So rather than doing the block practice, the educator in this scenario is looking at the grade level content, which in this case is represented by the letter D. And they're looking at what pieces from A, B, and C, the prior grade level, do students have to know to access this new grade level content, okay? And they're also recognizing that yes, all content's important from prior grade level, but it's not all created equal in the sense of what students actually need to be able to access the current content. So when we're looking at this, the big thing I want you to see is that it is proximity, right? Not only are they teaching just what needs to be taught to be able to access that new grade level content, but they're doing it in places where it makes sense. So it's connecting with that grade level content that is coming up. So whenever we teach D, but we know in this first section that they really need to have this mastered from A before I can teach D, they're doing it in a quick way that helps students be able to master the new content. They're not spending a lot of time blocking this out and practicing it in mass. Are there any questions about this piece before we move on? Okay. So when we were together on August 2nd, Brandon, my colleague, he guided you guys through a high-level overview of the steps necessary to diagnose student learning. And then we're going to continue to dive into this when we meet on October 15th. But today, I really want us to explore deeply the four components of accelerated learning rather than the diagnosing part. And so that's why we're going to spend today looking at high expectations, grade appropriate assignments, strong instruction, and deep engagement. So I know you've seen these because we spent some time previously digging into the opportunity myth, but we're going to approach them in a very specific order today. So normally you may have gone through grade appropriate assignments first and then gone through all the other pieces. But today we're actually going to start with number 4, which is high expectations. And then we're going to go into grade appropriate assignments. And we're going to look at some protocols that you can use to help ensure that the assignments you're putting in front of kids are grade appropriate. And then we'll take a look at strong instruction and deep engagement. And we're going to look at how the Nmis and some of the observation protocols that Tntp uses can help you ensure strong instruction. And then finally, we're going to look at deep engagement, and we're going to look at some of the pieces in the Nmis that are specifically designed to help boost deep engagement in your students. Again, this is just where we're at right now. We just reviewed the Accelerated Learning Foundation, and we're jumping straight into the 4 components and planning and instruction. So I want you guys to take a moment, and I want you to think about some challenges that we faced this year as math teachers. What are challenges that your students faced also with math this year? And I'm just going to give you about 90 seconds to brainstorm some ideas. Feel free, you can put them in the chat. But I just want you really thinking about what are some things that were a struggle this past year or maybe year and a half. And if you'd like to share out verbally, you can also share out. If not, feel free to throw those reflections in the chat. I see lots of foundational skills.
I know personally with me, I teach 2nd grade, and it is like with most of my students, it is like I am trying to teach end of year kindergarten. And it's really difficult trying to teach this 2nd grade standard, and then trying to go back and give them the most of the students, give them what they need to even understand what we're doing. So I'm going, our principal gave me a really good idea the other day of going back teaching part per whole, where in kindergarten they learn that. And then in 1st grade, it's in force, but a lot of these guys did not get the 1st grade training. So on the education part, so that's where I personally struggle, and my colleague struggles is on that part.
Thank you so much for sharing. Could you tell me your name?
My name is Robbie.
Thank you so much, Robbie, for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I think a lot of your colleagues here in the chat are experiencing a lot of the same things. I'm seeing a lot of head nodding as we're going through this. So you are not alone in this. And I think today I'm hopeful that this professional development that we're spending time on today is really going to help address some of these challenges that we know all educators are facing right now, and especially math educators who have seen the most dip and the most slide because of our interrupted instruction. So thank you so much. I want you to be thinking about these challenges as we continue, because we're going to come back to them in a moment. But I just wanted to really get us reflecting on even just the beginning of this year too, and not just last year, because we're in the beginning of a new school year as well. So thank you all for participating in that. So let me scoot over to, okay, here we go. So today we're going to be starting with high expectations. And in the opportunity myth, we found that 82% of teachers support their state's academic standards. So they believe in the state academic standards that are set. However, 44% of teachers expect that students can actually meet those standards. So we see a really large gap here in what teachers believe is important, as far as we believe as educators that these standards are quality and that's what we should be teaching kids. But unfortunately, only 44% of teachers actually think that students can meet those expectations. And so we're going to take a look today at just the huge impact that having high expectations for our students and starting with that growth mindset can have on our classrooms. So we're going to watch a video in just a moment. Whoops, hang on one second. And we're going to be looking at this question right here as we watch the video. So why might growth mindset be especially important this year, and what do we risk without a growth mindset. And so I want us to be thinking about how the expectations we set for ourselves and for others really do speak to the mindsets that we possess as educators. And a key tenet of high expectations is really approaching our work with a growth mindset. So we're going to watch this video, and I want you thinking about this piece here of how growth mindset's important, but also think about the challenges that you were just talking about and how really having a growth mindset can help with some of those challenges. And give me 1 second because I need to make sure that I'm sharing my sound. Oop. Can you see the video? Yes, no? Yes, okay. Whoops. Sorry, technical difficulties for 1 moment. Let me pull that video back up. It disappeared for a second. Okay, I think I got it now. If you can see the video, can you just give me a thumbs up really quick so I know we're good to go? Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Gotta love technology. I know you guys are all pros at this point.
A growth mindset is a belief that people really are growth oriented, that they're malleable, that they learn with experience and with effort. This is a topic of scientific study that dates back 50 years. It is the idea that we can approach a situation, a good or a bad situation, and think, what can I do here to change things for the better, to keep things on course? That is an optimistic, growth oriented mindset. The opposite is a fixed mindset, a deep down belief that really people don't change. You're either a writer or you're not a writer. You're a natural public or you're not meant to be in front of the cameras. You're kind of a people person with terrific social skills that nobody had to teach you, or you're destined to be awkward forever. These two orientations in life powerfully influence how people act, in particular when they're faced with challenges. It's in those moments of challenge that some of us rise to the occasion and others shrink back. And what explains these very different reactions, these very different motivation levels, are our beliefs. When you teach children that the brain is plastic, that neuroscience affirms that the growth mindset is the correct one, that neurons continue to grow throughout the entire lifespan, this actually inclines students to have more of a growth mindset than a fixed one. And that in turn leads to longer term achievement.
Okay, let me get us back to our original screen.
Wow, look at this.
Okay, so, whoops. Why might a growth mindset be especially important this year, and what do we risk without having it? So go ahead in the chat now, or coming off mute, either one. I would love for you to answer this question. I see students need to believe they can. Thank you, Lena. Oh, thank you, Kanika. Sorry. me try this again.
I think help students understand that math is really not that difficult.
I love that. I think so often we hear people say, I can't do math, I can't do it. And
Yeah,
everybody can do math. I think even when I was a student, I used to think, oh, I can't do math, it's so hard. And I had to fight that misconception in myself for so long. And that happens with our students all the time. And so I love that you mentioned that.
yeah. I think the stigma that math has is usually where I start every year.
Mhm. Yeah. Love that. Give me 1 second. You guys keep sharing, please. I need to get back to the PowerPoint really quickly. So give me 1 second to do that, but please keep sharing. You can come off mute or share in the chat. Can you all see the PowerPoint now? Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay. So yeah, so we know that growth mindset is incredibly important, especially when we're thinking about mathematics. So I wanted us to take a moment now and think about the difference between fixed mindset and growth mindset. And I know this is not the first time that you as educators have talked about growth mindset or fixed mindset, but really when we're looking at fixed mindset students, they avoid challenges. They give up easily when they face obstacles. They see their efforts as fruitless or worse. They ignore useful negative feedback, and they feel threatened with the success of others. Whereas a growth mindset individual, they embrace challenges, they persist in the face of setbacks, they see effort as a path to mastery, and they learn from criticism. And they find lessons and inspiration in the success of others. And this is really what we want for students. We want students to be these growth mindset individuals when they leave school and in school. And so we're going to talk today about how high expectations can really help us to create these growth mindsets in our students. And if you're wondering, this work right here comes from Carol Dweck, and she's a psychologist at Stanford. And her book is called Mindset, and it's totally worth reading. If you haven't gotten a chance, it's really, really wonderful. And it talks about the importance of growth mindset. So here on the screen, we see some mindsets revealed below. And I want us to go ahead, and if you've used the annotation tool before, I would love for you to put a star or just a marking on the screen of something that you have heard before. And if you can't use the annotation tool, that's fine. You could just type it in the chat, like I've heard number 1 or number 2 or whatever it might be. But we're going to actually spend some time in breakout rooms in just a moment talking about these mindsets and talking about the importance of teachers having growth mindsets and having high expectations in their classrooms. So take a minute, look at these 4 mindsets on the screen, and feel free to use that annotation tool to mark up the screen and put notes next to the ones that you've heard, or you can type it in the chat. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to open up some breakout rooms, and I'm going to put some questions in the chat before we go. These are the questions I want you to discuss in your breakout rooms. So you should be able to see them once you get into your breakout rooms together, but we're going to be looking at what's the result if adults in the building hold these underlying beliefs here on the screen. How do these beliefs negatively impact math instruction specifically? And how would a fixed mindset affect how teachers guide students through problem solving and productive struggle? So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms now. I just randomly assign them, so you'll end up in a breakout room with a couple different people. And I'm going to pop through them in a minute to listen in on your conversations, but I'm going to give you guys about 2-3 minutes to chat in your rooms. go ahead and join those as they're popping up. Awesome. Thank you so much. Were you able to join the breakout room?
You're still muted.
Thank you. Sorry. So I think everyone is back now. Thank you for letting me know that I was muted. I would love for us now to go ahead and in the chat, feel free to write something about what you guys talked about as far as how these beliefs here on the screen could negatively impact math instruction for our students. Also, I'd love to hear from one group, if you don't mind sharing out with the group what you talked about.
This is Robbie. I know with our group, we talked about a lot on the poverty one, about how where our kids are coming from. Like a lot of them are very low income, and the school I teach at, we never know what the kids go home to, whether they go home to a parent or no parent, or they go from house to house, to house. So there's no consistency for the family at home. And but then we got to thinking about that. It is hard not to remember. We got to teach the whole child, but then to remember those high expectations. Sometimes it's easy to bring down, to lower the expectation to meet the child where the child's at. And I think that is, that's what we were talking about.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate you jumping right in. And I'm seeing some other people sharing in the chat. Yeah, I think that that's super important. So when we're looking at different mindsets, there's a lot of different ways that we can take it, but I want us to look at students in a way that everyone can achieve, right? And when we're thinking about high expectations, we're thinking about how everyone can have growth and everyone can meet that bar if they're given the opportunity. And no matter the circumstances, we can still have those high expectations for students. And sometimes our expectations, even if they're meant in a good way, like we care about the student, sometimes we can find ourselves, like Rob was saying, lowering that bar because we're worried about teaching the whole child, but we still need to maintain those high expectations and we can't lower the bar for those students. So what I want us to do today, I don't have a poll set up. Instead, I just want you can type in the chat. It's supposed to say A, B, C. It says AAA, but just pick A, B, or C. Which one of the following teacher mindsets will lead to increased student achievement? And you can just type that in the chat, A, B, or C. You can take a moment to look at the following answers. Feel free to type that. Thank you, Stacy. We're going to do the same thing on the next couple slides. I'm going to post a couple scenarios and you can answer the question above. So looking here, we're going to see what does it mean to teach mathematics with high expectations? And I love how we talked about this already a little bit, but we recognize that every student can do math, right? Every student can solve mathematically challenging tasks. Every student can build a positive mathematical identity and a sense of agency in their mathematics. And that we can teach in ways that ensure every student is reasoning and making sense of math on a daily basis. We can also reflect on ways that tasks and teaching can be improved to provide greater access, challenge, and support for every learner. So this is high expectations for students, but also high expectations for ourselves as well, when you're thinking about how we approach math and our own mindsets. So we're going to take a minute, and I would love for someone in just a minute to read the quote on the screen. And then we're going to do an activity called a waterfall. So once I read this quote, and not yet, I want you to answer the sentence stem on the screen. So feel free, you can type it in the chat now, but I don't want you to hit enter until I say go, okay? I'm going to cold call somebody to read. Actually, I can't see everybody's names when their cameras are on for some reason. So if somebody would just come off mute and read the quote in yellow for me, that would be great.
In a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Carol Dweck.
Thank you so much. Was it Audra? Is that correct? Awesome. Thank you, Audra. Okay, so now I want you to think about your own abilities and your own growth mindset today, because remember, we said we're going to have high expectations for our students, but that also starts with high expectations for us. So when I say go ahead and type in your answer in the chat. One way I can develop my abilities today is, and you can go ahead and go now. Thank you, Stacy. I really appreciate that. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Audra. Let me give us just a few more seconds to type that in. One way I can develop my own abilities today is blank. Thank you, Anastasia. Awesome. Feel free to continue typing that. We're going to move on just for the sake of time, but I love seeing your reflections and I love hearing how you guys are going to really dig in today and think about ways that you can improve your own mindset as well as your students' mindset. So we've talked now about growth mindset and we've talked about high expectations. Now we're going to pivot slightly and we're going to be thinking about grade appropriate assignments. So I want you right now to take a moment and think about an assignment that you've created for students in the past. And I want you to think about, how did you determine if that assignment was grade appropriate and what resources did you use to determine that? So just take a moment, just a quick reflection. You can type it in the chat if you want, but you don't have to. How did you determine if the assignment was grade appropriate and what resources did you use? So in the opportunity myth, we saw evidence that we as educators have really been dishonest with our students about how well prepared they are to reach their goals. So when we looked at schools, 71% of students succeeded on their assignments, meaning that they were making A's and B's on their assignments. However, when we actually looked at the demands of the assignments compared to the grade level standard, they only met the grade level standard on those assignments 17% of the time. So even though students are meeting the demands of the assignments themselves are not meeting the demands of the standard. So while students are earning A's and B's, they're not necessarily actually prepared for college level work because they're not getting a chance to even see grade level assignments. If we never give kids an at-bat, they're not going to be ready when they see that kind of work in college. And this is going to be especially true for our students from subpopulations that are non-dominant demographic groups. So this would be our students of color, students from low-income backgrounds, students with IEPs, and students who are English language learners. When we looked at the difference between how often they were given the opportunity to even try grade level work, you'll see that that was 12%. Whereas students who were not part of that subpopulation group, they received that opportunity so many more times. And what I also want you to see here, though, is that all students can achieve. Going back to that high expectation piece, 56% of the time and 65 compared to 65% of the time. 56% of the time, students of color are meeting those goals that are set from the grade level standards when they're given the opportunity. 65% of the time for mostly white schools. Okay, so we're seeing that students, no matter who they are, can achieve. Going back to that high expectation, all students can do math, right? All students, regardless of whatever indicator group they're part of, they are able to achieve just as well as any other student. And so today we're going to look at how are we actually vetting the work that's going in front of our kids? How are we making sure that it's quality, that it's hitting that grade level bar, that we're giving kids the at-bats to hit those grade level demands. Before we jump into the protocol, I would just like to take a minute because I think those stats are really staggering and it's really important for us to sit in that in a moment. So feel free right now to just take a second to reflect on the data we just looked at before we jump in. And then we're going to go into a breakout room. So I'm going to reopen our breakout rooms now. And I want you to think about this data, and I'm going to go ahead and hang on one second. I'm going to put in the chat. Oh, just kidding. I'm actually just going to open the breakout rooms. So I'm going to open the breakout rooms, and I just want you to think about the data we looked at and the opportunities for grade level work. And you should be able to access those rooms now. Erica, were you able to join the breakout room? Okay, I know that people are coming back from the breakout rooms. We're going to go ahead and get back to our slide, but I would love to hear either in the chat or sharing out, what are some things that you talked about with these statistics here and the importance of grade level assignments? And it can either be in the chat or if you can share out, feel free to. I heard a lot of really great stuff when I was in group, I think it was group 1. So I'm gonna put y'all on the spot for a second. So I would love someone from group 1 to go ahead and share some of the things that you guys chatted about in your group.
Can y'all hear me? Okay, I'm from group 1, and one of the things that we talked about is in the state of New Mexico, who is the minority? And we kind of touched on, there's a lot more than just putting race or color in there, because you have social economics, you've got where people come from. A lot of our, for lack of a better word, like our immigrant students that cross over, they're harder working than a lot of them that have just been in the school system. You know, and so it's like their scores tend to go up, but then we have to factor in, you know, where are their parents? I mean, and I'm talking students as wholes, because people are becoming parents younger and younger, and so they may not have that structure at home, or they may be more in a poverty level, or maybe they're working 3 or 4 jobs. But we had a hard time deciphering between, if you go just off of race or color, you know, you can't really say it's the minorities anymore, because there are a lot of other students, depending on their background, that are at risk.
Yeah, I think that the big thing here that I want us to take away from is, one, I know New Mexico is a really unique state, right? It has a very unique demographic, and you have such a awesome group of cultures and people to pull from. And that's, I think, what makes New Mexico such an awesome state. But I think it's really key for us to understand that when we are thinking about bias and how we are presenting work to students, this data right here leads me to the understanding that teachers do have an unconscious bias of saying that, oh, because of this, and this student can't achieve, so I'm going to lower the expectation for them. Whether that is coming from a place of, you know, a place of love, in the sense of that I feel bad for them, that we still don't want to be lowering that expectation, because pity can be just as damaging as outright bias. And so what I want us to be looking at today is like how this unconscious bias against certain groups of people can cause us to lower that expectation for them. And so I want us to, again, we're going back to that high expectation each time, like all students can achieve, no matter what status they are, as far as like socioeconomic, no matter which racial or cultural group they're attached to, any of those things, any student can achieve if they're given the opportunities. And so that's what we're going to spend our time on today, looking at the assignment protocol that TNTP has created, but also we're going to dig into the Nmis. And I was talking a moment ago in some of the groups, and we were just discussing that these tools are going to be really great for all of you too, especially thinking about, some of you are coming to math from other content areas, or some of you are coming to math from as a brand new teacher. So there's just a lot of great tools that you're going to be able to use to help hone your own instructional practices and make sure that you're putting the best work in front of students. So this right here is TNTP's math assignment protocol. I'm going to put the link to this in the chat as well. Give me 1 second to do that. We're going to look at the components of it in just a moment. Okay, you should have access to it in the chat. So this protocol is created to help teachers and leaders measure the quality of their assignments. And we're really going to be focusing on answering the question of, does this task give students the opportunity to meaningfully engage in worthwhile grade level content, mathematical practices, and relevance? And the big piece I want you to look at here is that meaningful engage piece. We're not just looking at, are they engaged in the work that's in front of them, but also, is this work that they're doing actually helping them build on their long-term learning? Is it going to have a long-term impact in their learning as they move forward? And so there are going to be some pieces that connect with the Nmis to support your planning for units and lessons. And we're going to take some time in a moment to look at the tool itself and just take some time to kind of walk through the pieces. And I'm going to give you time in breakout rooms to just examine it on your own before we dive in. I do want to preface that this is just a tool. It's not a requirement necessarily for you. We want you to use it as what is in a valuable way for you. And you can definitely use it in conjunction with other tools that maybe your district or your campus is using. But this is just another tool in your toolbox. So I'm going to put us back into breakout rooms now for 3 minutes.
We couldn't access the file.
Okay, give me 1 second. Kanika, do you think that you could look at the access for that for me, please? Let me try. Whoops. Let me try it one more time. This file does not exist. Let me see it. Let me see if I can, give me 1 second, and I think I might be able to add it as a as an attachment. So just give me 1 second to do that. I'm going to put you actually, I'm going to give you just a quick 1 minute break while I do that. So take care of yourself, go to the restroom, get some water, whatever you need to do while I get this file downloaded, and we'll come back together. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and bring us back together in about 30 seconds. So if you are busy getting water, doing whatever you need to, go ahead and head on back. Kanika put a link in the chat for us. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to the Tntp website, and there's going to be a couple different links that you can click on, and you're going to look at the math protocol list. So I'm actually going to show you what that looks like. So if I click on the link, it's going to take me to the student toolkit experience here, and we're just going to scroll down, and you're going to click on the math assignment review, and it's actually going to pull up a Word document for you. Okay, so go ahead and pull that up now. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to do that, and then I'm going to put you back in breakout rooms. Okay, I'm going to open our breakout rooms back up. I'll go ahead and also send the link in the breakout room so that if you need it, you can access it there. And the rooms are open now, so feel free to join those rooms.
You're on mute.
As you guys are coming back from the breakout rooms, go ahead and type in the chat, what are some things that stood out to you in the protocol? And those rooms should be closing up in the next 20 seconds. I know people were wrapping up their conversations. And I do believe everyone is back together now. So we're just typing in the chat. What are some things that stood out to you when you looked at the math assignment protocol? You can also share out by unmuting. I was in group 2 and I heard some really great stuff. So I would love for somebody from group 2 to share out, even if it was just a wondering, just what are some things that stood out to you?
So we were trying to figure out kind of the protocol worksheet was more like per individual assignment that we were creating on our own versus per unit or per whole lesson. Like say the week lesson, it'd be the protocol was for like Monday's assignment, Tuesday's assignment, making sure it was on grade level target.
Yes. And you can, I mean, you can also adopt this when you're looking at overall units as well. But the purpose of it, yes, is to generally look at specific assignments to determine if that's a grade level assignment or not. Yes, correct. Any other wonderings, noticing something that stood out to you before we move on and dive into the protocol? Okay, well, we're going to keep going. So we're actually going to spend some time now looking at the different pieces of the protocol. So the first component of the math assignment protocol is content, and it has the guiding question next to it. Does this assignment align with the expectations defined by grade level standards? So we're going to take 2 minutes to review this component specifically and the metrics used to measure the quality of assignments. So we're going to go back into our, actually, we're going to say whole group this time, but take a minute. I'm going to give you 1 minute to read it on your own because you have it pulled up in front of you, but it also is on the slide. What is the benefit or value of using a protocol or rubric to measure the quality of the assignments you create? So what's the value of using a protocol or rubric? So take a minute to read, and then I'm going to cold call some people to share out. Audra, I see your hand. Feel free to share.
Well, I kind of liken this to when my students create a rubric to grade their own work. This would be kind of like what I allow my students to do for themselves to assess where they need to be, where they're at, what they need to improve on. This would be that like that for me, using it as a tool to make sure that I'm meeting their needs. Did it actually help me? The assignment, did it actually help them learn? Did it do what did it meet my expectations? What did it work proficiently? You know, that kind of stuff. Keep you on track.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Anyone else? The other piece I want to highlight of using a rubric or a protocol to measure quality is it really promotes equity, right? Because when we're using a rubric or protocol, we're really thinking about it from a non-biased perspective, okay? And so when I think that the big piece here is as educators, we want to be promoting equitable learning experiences for all students, and using protocols and rubrics really highlight that because we're creating this unbiased review of the work that we're putting in front of students, regardless of the students that are actually there. So we're going to move in now, and I want us to look here. Whoops, sorry. Okay, we're going to take some time now to dig into the Nmis. So I'm going to give you a website to go to in the chat. The Nmis is also on the New Mexico Public Education Department website. You can access all of the different Nmis documents. Today, we're going to be utilizing the 3rd grade document specifically. So we're going to pull it up, and then I'd love for you to please keep it up throughout the remainder of our session today. So just like in the Tntp Tntp protocol, there's a couple pieces in the Nmis that I really want to highlight when we're looking at aligning to grade level standards. Okay, so the big piece that I want to highlight here is that in the Nmis, the full language of this academic standard is present there under the box that says standard. But then additionally, there's a clarification statement that's really written in plain language. And so I know I was talking in one of our breakout sessions with a teacher who's relatively new to teaching math, or she finds more of her time, all of her expertise she feels like is in reading. And I was saying, oh, well, there's this great tool in the Nmis that actually helps you understand the mathematical concepts. And remember, when we were talking about the first piece of learning acceleration, it's that understand piece. The teacher has to understand the content they're teaching. And that's where this clarification statement really comes to play. Additionally, you'll see the students who demonstrate understanding can box here in the green. This one is showing you if students are mastering the standard, this is what you should be seeing consistently. And so if the assignment that you're putting in front of students is not producing these pieces, students are not demonstrating these different bullets here, you can assume that then, oh, this is probably not hitting that grade level demand because students are not able to actually do the things that it says students should be able to do. Are there any questions about this piece and how the two connect between, or how the connection between the Tntp protocol and the Nmis works here? Okay, we're going to keep going. So the next component of the math assignment protocol tool is mathematical practices. And the guiding question for this piece is, does the assignment provide meaningful opportunities for the students to engage in the mathematical practices for this grade level? So just take 2 minutes to review the metrics of the component, just like we did with the last one. And then we're going to come back together as a group, and I'm going to have you guys talk about the significance of students engaging in mathematical processes. So 2 minutes, it's 10:40. At 10:42, we're going to come back together. Feel free to craft a response to the question I'm going to put in the chat as you're thinking. Okay, so what is the significance of students engaging in mathematical practices? Why is this important? You can also answer in the chat, that's fine too. We want to be exposing our students to really rigorous opportunities to not only learn the concepts, but also practice the math that they're doing in ways that connect with the standard. So we're going to look now at some mathematical practices that are actually evident in the Nmis. So we're going to switch gears and look at the connection between the two again, like we did previously. So here in the Nmis, these are the standards for mathematical practice that are represented here. Educators can use this when they're planning student tasks to ensure that students are engaging with mathematical practices that are related to the specific grade level content, okay? So not only are they engaging in mathematical practices, but those practices are connected to the standard itself. So this is where that alignment piece comes in, that we're asking students to do meaningful aligned tasks and that everything aligns back to that grade level standard. No worries, Stacy, you're good. Thanks for letting us know. The third component that we're going to look at now of the math assignment protocol is relevance. And I saw somebody earlier put in the chat that math needs to be relevant to them. And I love that you said that, because we're going to talk about the importance of authentic opportunities to engage in math in real world contexts. Okay, so I want us, again, we're going to spend some time, just a minute, to look at the different metrics here on this part of the protocol. And then I want you to think about, where would you typically find this component within your current curriculum? Where would you find that authentic learning piece, that relevance in your current curriculum? Okay, I'd love to hear from someone to come. I would love for someone to come off mute so we can hear, where would you already find this component within the curriculum that you currently use? Or does it not exist? And if so, where do you look for things to fill in those gaps? Thank you, Robbie. I see you said at the beginning of the unit. Thank you, Stacy. And I want to push it further. So what are ways that you build in those real world connections throughout your math lessons? So you may be able to find it in your curriculum, but then how do you actually embed those in your lessons? I see cross-curricular activities. Thank you, Audra. Introducing science and reading. We're going to actually talk about the importance of cross-curricular components in a little bit. So you're right ahead of me. Great job. Story problems, word problems, making connections. Awesome. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, so I see you guys are already looking at different ways that you can bring in real world concepts into math. And the Tntp protocol here does that for you. But I also want to highlight a couple pieces within the Nmis that also do this for you. So a couple components in the Nmis that are also going to help you build in those real world connections and that authentic math is in the constructive response section. So each of the clusters of standards, they have a sample task that shows how you can bring in some different authentic components to mathematics. So this example can be used to discuss possible so this example, you can use it as a jumping off point to create your own instruction pieces. And you can find similar processes here when you're creating formative assessments. There's a lot of different options in the Nmis, especially in the assessment guide at the bottom, where you can look for these sample tasks that have the constructive response, where you can bring in, like you were saying a minute ago, those real world problems, or you can make those cross-curricular connections. And we're going to look at that piece a little bit later today. So we talked a little bit earlier today about the need sometimes to do some remediation in brief components when it's connected with learning acceleration. So remember, we're not spending lots of time mass blocking out these times to teach old standards. We are really taking time to be strategic about how we are bringing in material that students are going to need to access the new material. And this is where the MLSS component or multi-layered system of support section of your Nmis comes into play. So you'll see here in each, in the Nmis, there's a multi-layered system of support. So what it does here, it's a vertical alignment piece that helps you identify the previous learning that students are going to need to access to be able to master the current content. It also is great because you can look at how you can help all learners. So not just learners who are struggling with mathematics, but your students who are really mastering that content and are ready for the next level. So it gives you previous learning, current learning, and future learning practices so you can build on extensions if you need to for certain students. So we're going to spend some time in some individual work time. I'm going to put a link to the Google folder in the chat in just a moment, and you're going to review 2 third grade assignments. And I want you to review each and determine if they are grade appropriate or not using the protocol we just created and the Nmis. And if they're not grade appropriate, what are you going to do to improve them? And I'll put these questions in the chat as well, so you don't have to memorize them or anything like that. And then afterwards, we're going to go into breakout rooms to discuss your findings. Okay, so I'm going to start by putting the link to the Google folder and the assignment and the Nmis in the chat. You should already have the assignment protocol. And you actually should already have the Nmis as well. This is the Google folder link that should have access to the assignments. And then I'm going to add the questions that or the directions to. So you're going to review both assignments using the protocol. And then determine if they're grade level appropriate. And then if they're not grade level appropriate, what would you improve? So I'm going to give you 3 minutes to do this independently. Feel free to turn your cameras off while you're working and mute yourself. And then in just a moment, after 3 minutes, I'm going to send you into breakout rooms. About 1.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes left of work time. And then we're going to jump into groups. Okay, give you 30 more seconds to wrap up your findings. And then I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. You're going to share your findings about the 2 assignments you reviewed and if you felt that they were grade appropriate or not. Okay, I'm going to be opening breakout rooms now. You're going to have 5 minutes. The breakout room should close automatically now in 5 minutes, but you'll have 5 minutes to share your findings, and I'll see you all in a few minutes. Stacy, do you remember which room you were in before? I know you got kicked out for a second, and I want to put you back in the same place.
Yeah, I was in room 1.
Room 1. Okay, I'll put you back there. Okay, so we are all kind of coming back together. The session should be closing in the next 10 seconds or so. What I'd love for you to do now is go ahead and share one thing or two things that you guys chatted about in your room. So I know it was a really quick amount of time to be looking at the different assignments, but hopefully you got through at least one. And what are some things that you noticed? What are some things that you decided as a group? I know for some of you, I don't know for everybody, but was this a new, how many of you have actually worked with the Nmis before? Was this a new tool for you? I know it just came out over the summer, so some of it might be new for some of you. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of it, never used it before, so this is brand new. Okay, that's good to know for me as well. Audrey, I see your hand. Go ahead and feel free to share.
So I guess I opened something completely different. I opened up a video of her teaching third grade. I guess the teacher was teaching, and she was really engaging, but she was more focused on the one student answering when there's a lot of students. And so I was thinking there's multiple opportunities there for her to think, pair, share, get them to work together, maybe in various groups, and then maybe go to groups and discuss their findings and work, get them more actively engaged. And then I know that we also discussed the two other assignments and how one was kind of below grade level, and then the other one was where third grade should be at. So that was interesting, I thought.
How did you guys decide? I'm just going to push you a little bit further because I'd love to hear your thinking on this. When you were looking at the assignment protocol and looking at those assignments, how did you determine that one was below grade level and one was on grade level?
Well, Bonnie was taught. Well, I don't have any experience.
Do you want me to talk about it?
Yes, yes.
So the one lesson on building the arrays. So I'm a second grade teacher, and that's what we're working on right now. And I mean, in all reality, we probably have lots of third grade students that would benefit from building those arrays, or even using that at the beginning of third grade when you were diving back into multiplication. Whereas the other lesson was going to be more your traditional third grade lesson. We use Pearson and Vision. That's our math program that we have. And so the assessments look very similar to that second lesson that I looked at, but probably would be very difficult for some of our students without some scaffolding and just some giving them some structure as far as how to process the whole problem to figure out the answer. Whereas you would have some students that would look at it and immediately know, oh yeah, it's B or it's C or whatever.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much for sharing. It's just good for me to hear and for everyone else to hear all of your great thinking that you guys were doing in your groups. So yeah, so the piece that I want you to see here is that while what Bonnie was saying is, yes, there are students who could benefit from doing arrays, and it might be helpful to do a quick review over that concept before you jump into grade level content. It isn't grade level to be spending whole lessons on second grade content. And so we really want to be pushing for that grade level content that students are experiencing. Yes, we can provide those just-in-time scaffolds in quick moments where it's necessary, but we should be spending the bulk of our instructional time on grade level materials. So what we're going to do right now is, I know it's been a long morning, and so we're going to take a quick break. I'm going to give you guys about, let me see what time it is right now. I'm going to give you 7 minutes, a 7-minute break. But before you go, I want you to think about this question here. How do our unconscious biases affect the work that we give students? And what can we do to combat those biases and provide grade appropriate assignments for all? There is a Padlet here that you can access. You can do it through this QR code. You can also type in this link here into your browser, but please take some time right now before you go on break to do the reflection piece, and then you have 7 minutes. It is 11:02 right now. I'll actually give you 8 minutes, so we'll come back at 11:10. Okay, so 11:10 we'll get started. Okay, it is 10:10, so I'm going to go ahead and bring us back together. I want to respect your time and get you out of here on time today. So we have now gone through the foundations of accelerated learning. We've gone through an understanding of how we can make sure appropriates are grade level appropriate, assignments are grade level appropriate. And we've also looked at high expectations for our students. So now we're going to move into the third component, which is strong instruction, where students do most of the thinking in the lesson. So what is your vision of strong math instruction? What do you see teachers doing in those strong instruction pieces? And what do you see students doing in those strong instruction practices? So go ahead, take a moment. I'm going to give you about 90 seconds. I know some of us are still coming back together. 90 seconds. Feel free to write this in the chat if you'd like, but also you can just write it down for yourself or reflect on it on your own. So in our research from the opportunity myth, you can see this data here that even where students had access to grade level materials, they often still were missing out on the strong instruction piece, and particularly thinking about opportunities to do the thinking on their own. And so I want you to look at here. So they observed over 900 classrooms. Of those 900, only 295 had grade level content. And then of those 295, only 74 of those classrooms actually had students that had grade level content presented to them, and they actually asked students to do the thinking in the lesson. And so, yes, high expectations, grade level content, they're great on their own, but if students are not actually doing the work in the lesson, we can't move them further down the line of gaining meaningful mathematical experiences and skills because they're not actually participating in the work. And so TNTP has created this observation and walkthrough rubric that you guys are going to see in a moment. But in the classrooms, we're going to be looking for 4 things. The first thing is a culture of learning. So are all students engaged in the work of the lesson from start to finish, so bell to bell? Content, does the content of the lesson reflect the Common Core instructional shifts and standards? Instructional practices, did the teacher employ instructional practices that reflect the Common Core instructional shifts? And then student ownership, did students do the thinking and exhibit key content specific practices during the lesson? These are the 4 key things that the rubric is going to focus on. And you'll see that here: culture of learning, high quality mathematical content, and high quality instructional practices. So we're going to also look at the Nmis in a moment, and I want you to consider how the Nmis might not only support teachers with strong curricular planning, so what you're actually creating for your classrooms, but also instructional delivery. And we're going to look at that in a moment. But before we do, we're actually going to spend some time reviewing a lesson. I know a couple of you maybe clicked on the video earlier when I sent the link, but we're going to spend some time looking at this lesson and reviewing I think her name is Miss Hinton's class based on these things: culture of learning, high quality mathematical content, high quality instructional practices, and student ownership. So it should, whoops. Give me 1 second. Can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can see the video? Okay, great. Uh-oh. Let's try it again. Well, it worked earlier. Okay. Let's try it this way.
I can't physically go in there and close the picture, right? Can you go in there and close the door? No. So you gotta work with what they gave you. If they're telling you this is 7, and they're saying they want everything, but they don't want the door. If you don't want something, what do you usually do with it? Okay, you can ignore it, but if it's math, what would you do something with it? Okay, subtract because you don't want it anymore, right? So you have 7 here. What are you gonna do with the 2 inches for the door? Okay, think about what you just said. If this is 7 inches, the door is 2 inches. You don't want the door. So what would you do? What operation could you use? Subtraction. So you cannot say that's 7. This is 7 minus 2. What's 7 minus 2? So 5. So this is really 5 inches. Okay? That's what's left when we take away the door. What would you do with all those numbers now? Again, perimeter. What would you do with all the numbers now? Caitlin? Would you add in the 2? No. Would you add another 7? No. No. What are you going to be adding, Caitlin, instead? 5. Okay. So you would add all this together and get your actual answer. You don't worry about the door. Okay. Be careful with that kind of stuff on STAR. They could do that to you. The last example that I want to show you. They have a square. They don't give you numbers. So again, what measurement tool would you use to get those numbers? What measurement tool would you use to get those numbers, Carlos? The mathematics chart. So you got it that time. Awesome. Now, what would you do with your mathematics chart, Carlos? Are you going to measure the perimeter? Can you measure the perimeter? What do you measure? Okay, so the what of the triangle and the what of the square. Are these, oh, are you an area yet? What are these called? The what of the figures. The what of the figures. Somebody's gonna have to help them. Omar. The side of the figure. Remember the formula was side plus side plus side plus side. So you have to measure the what, Carlos? This side. All right. So let's say we measured it, and let's say this was 2 centimeters. 2 centimeters. If all the sides are the same, what's this one going to be? All the sides are 2. 2. I put 2 centimeters. Be careful. Don't think of one. If I'm saying all the sides are the same. Let's say that this right here is 4. What does that mean about all these sides? Oh, they're all 4. They're all going to be equal. Okay, they're all equal. So you have 4, 4, 4. So you get the perimeter of both figures. So 2 plus 2 plus 2, that's 2 plus 2 equals 4. Cross out 2 of the 2's, you just use them. You have 1, 2 left. Plus 2, you get 6 centimeters. Box in answers always. Is that the answer? No. No, but they'll probably put this as a what? An answer choice. An answer choice to do what to you? Tricky. So we get all these 4's together. 4 plus 4. Cross it out. That's 8. Plus another 4. 12. 12. Cross it out. One more. 16. 16 what? Very good. Always use the unit of measurement. Here are these 2. Hold on. Wait. Now I'm going to make it a little bit harder for you. What STAR could do, and stop. Wait till I ask. They could ask for the sum or the difference or the product of the perimeters. So what does that mean? If I want the sum of the perimeters, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Devin, what am I going to do? Okay, add because what word told you needed to add? No. Think about what I said. I said I wanted the sum of the perimeters. So what word is telling you to add? Sum. Sum, what that word sum, what does that mean? Does sum just mean to add? The sum is the what? The sum is the what? Someone's got to help him. The sum is the what? Larissa. Very good. The answer of an addition problem. Devin, sum is the what? The answer of the addition problem, of an addition problem. Now, that means we would just add these 2 numbers up. 16 plus 6, what would you get? 22. So that would be the sum. So again, sum 22. Again, what? Centimeters. And I should do the addition. What if I don't want to do the difference? What would I do? What operation would I use if I wanted to get the difference? Pattern. Subtraction. Remember when I call him Patrick's name, it's for Patrick. So if I subtract these two, 16 minus 6, what do I get? What did you just do right now? You added. Be careful. You're getting the difference, Daniel. What are you doing? Subtracting. The difference is the what? Very good. The answer is subtraction problem. So if you subtract these two, Daniel, what do you get? 10. So difference. Now you could also get the product, and if you got the product, what operation would you be using, Jacob? Multiplication. So you would just multiply those two. Now, what's going to happen is you guys are now going to do an activity together. We are going to have you two together, 3, 3, 2. Right here, you three go to Daniel, then it is his desk. Everybody over here is together with each partner. You're going to work with your partner to use your mathematics chart to find the perimeter of your desk. Okay? You're going to find the perimeter of your desk. So I want you to go ahead and start working with your partners to do that right now. Oh, I apologize. I will not give you the unit of measurement. I want you to do it in centimeters. I see some amazing teamwork going on here. Both of them are there on the side of their desk trying to get it together.
For sake of time, we're going to go ahead and stop it right there. It goes on for 25 minutes, but I'm going to have us now go into breakout rooms. Let's get back to our presentation. Oh, give me 1 second. Hang on 1 second. Oh. Okay, should be set up now. Okay, so I'm going to have you guys go into breakout rooms now, and I'm going to have you look at the walkthrough protocol. And I want you to think about the lesson you just saw. What evidence did you see in strengths and culture of learning? What evidence did you see in strengths in high quality mathematical content, and all of these different pieces? For sake of time, we're not going to have you discuss every single one. I'm going to have each of you assigned. I reassigned the breakout rooms. So I'm going to have each of you assigned to a specific question. So make sure that you look at the specific question before you go into breakout rooms. But the assignment protocol should be, or the walkthrough protocol link is in the Google folder for you. So make sure you pull that up. And then I'm going to have each of you look at the different questions that you're assigned to. So before you actually go into your breakout rooms, look at what number you're assigned to. Everyone is going to do question 5. So there's only 4 breakout rooms. So everyone's going to do question 5 and then look at which other one you're part of, 1, 2, 3, or 4. And you'll have 5 minutes. Anastasia, which room were you in? I want to be able to put you back in the right spot.
I was in room 2.
Okay, great.
I'm sorry, I made it go away. Can you send that again?
Yes, no worries.
Thank you.
Actually, I've already assigned it to you. So if you go to the bottom of your screen or wherever the bar is, you should be able to click on the breakout room section and just rejoin your room. Paula, were you able to join?
No, I'm having trouble maneuvering through here. There I am. All right, I'm going to let you, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Stacy, are you in this chat room?
Paula, this is Kanika. I can hear you.
All right, is Stacy Dietrich in this chat room as well?
No, I think that one is a duplicate. Which breakout room were you in?
Okay, I have been with you in this breakout room, number 5.
Okay, because right now there are 4 breakout rooms. So let me see. At the bottom of your screen, do you see breakout rooms?
I don't.
Okay, let me send you to one.
All right, thanks.
Mhm. Do you see a notification? There you go.
welcome back. I know everybody is finishing up their conversations and heading back to the room today. I popped into quite a few rooms and I just really appreciate you guys digging into this work and spending time in quality discussion with each other. And I know some of you may know each other, some of you may not, but I really appreciate just the time that you've put into this session today and the engagement that you've brought to it. What I'm going to have us do right now is we're going to have one person from each group share out their answer to this question here based on the rubric. And then if anyone wants to share out number 5, because all of you should have been looking at number 5 as well. So if you want to share out your findings from number 5, you may do that too. But group 1, what evidence did you see in the lesson of strengths and culture of learning?
So what we talked about is we felt like she should have given the kids more time to collaborate and share their ideas and thoughts. And it kind of addressed the other number 5 as well. I mean, the strengths were, yes, she was giving instruction, but so maybe we're coming up with more of a critique than a strength. But we felt like as far as like accelerated the learning, it would have been nice for them to have had more opportunities to work together, to explore that. And maybe she did that later on in the lesson and we just didn't get to see that. But we feel like that sort of accelerates learning whenever you have your peers teach you or work together to explore those particular topics that you are investigating.
Great, thank you, Bonnie, for sharing. Group 2, what evidence of strengths did you see in the high quality mathematical content?
We have shared, somebody had shared in our group that the teacher was using the vocabulary repeatedly and to make it was very high quality. And on number 5, we didn't get a chance to really talk about that, but my thoughts were if we were using the mode of I do, we do, you do, that would make it stronger.
Great, thank you, Robbie. I really appreciate you sharing out from your group. Group 3, what evidence do you see of strengths in high quality questions and tasks?
In our group, we talked about how the teacher throw the question to the kids. But I guess since she's working on the perimeter, it would be better if the kids would be manipulating with the sides themselves. So in the task, she could have the students measure the sides to get the perimeter.
I also noticed that, thank you so much for sharing. I also noticed too, what did she ask them to do when they were doing their work as a team or in their group work? She had them doing what?
Yeah, because it's unclear with that video what they're doing during the group work.
So she has them measuring the perimeter of their desk, which if you go back to our thoughts about authentic learning experiences, this is an opportunity, right, for her to embed this high quality task of them doing this in an authentic way in the classroom, right? So using something that's actually in front of them and applying perimeter to that. Did you guys talk about question 5 at all?
We wasn't able to get to number 5 in our group.
That's okay. Thank you
for that.
No worries. Okay, group 4, what evidence did you see of strengths in student ownership?
What we saw was like there was a lot of hand raising, so there was some student participation going on, and so they were answering. And then for question 5, some of the things that we thought she could do to make the lesson a little bit more engaging for next year was, have students go to the board, have them kind of show their peers what they know. Dry erase boards where they could work alongside. They could even go, I think she was talking about the door where they can go and like measure the door and show, how they did their measurements to how they got their answer, and just make it a little bit more engaging.
Great, thank you. Thank you guys so much for sharing. Thanks for engaging in that observation rubric. We're gonna also take a look at, those were the teacher focus pieces of the rubric, but we're actually gonna also look at the culture of learning and student ownership aspect from the student facing indicators here. And this is where I wanna make a really quick connection back to what we were talking about earlier with grade level assignments. So before we begin looking at the actual student actions in the lesson, we always want to look at the student work. We want to go back to what's actually being put in front of students, because students can be engaged in non-rigorous lessons, and that could give you a false positive on your observation rubric. So we always want to make sure that the content that they're experiencing first is grade level before we actually begin to look at the what students are actually, how students are engaging in that content. So that's one piece I just want you to focus on. If you can have a strong culture of learning, but if the lesson itself isn't allowing students to think critically, answer text-dependent questions, have strong, then you really can't have strong student ownership because they're not mastering that content. So I want to take us back to the I want to take us back quickly to the Nmis and talk about how the Nmis can also support strong instruction. So in the MLSS, which is the multi-layered system of support section of the Nmis, you can see suggested instructional strategies that are going to help you execute high quality instruction in your classrooms. So this on your third grade Nmis that I put in the chat, this is on pages 19 through 21. If you want to take a look at it to read, I'm going to give you a moment or two. I do want to preface that the Nmis provides tons of instructional strategies for each domain, and I don't suggest that you try to incorporate every single one. Definitely just pick 2 or 3 to incorporate into each lesson. And by doing this, you're going to, over time, create this toolbox that you're going to have to pull from to create strong instruction in your classroom. But I'm going to give you guys about a minute and a half to just look through some of those instructional strategies. Again, that's on pages 19 through 21 of that third grade Nmis. Give you about 30 more seconds to finish reading those instructional strategies in the Nmis. Okay, so here's what I want us to do now. I want you to think about all the different pieces of strong instruction that we just talked about. And in your breakout rooms, I'm going to put you back in your breakout rooms for 2 minutes. And in your breakout rooms, I want you to think about how these components align with your current practice in your classrooms, and then which aspects of strong instruction are you currently exercising well, and which ones can you improve upon? So again, I'm going to put you back in your breakout rooms for 2 minutes. And you can focus on these pieces. What components align with your current practice? Which aspects of strong instruction do you currently exercise well, and which can you improve upon? Okay, I think we are all back now from our breakout rooms. Thank you for engaging in conversation with your peers there. I would like to take just maybe 30 seconds really quickly to kind of debrief that strong instruction exercise that we just did. Are there any aha moments that you had, any pieces that you feel like, oh, this really aligns to what I'm doing now, or, oh, I really think I could improve upon this piece? I'd love to hear what you guys talked about. I heard a lot of really good stuff in group 2 when I was when I was popping into rooms. I would love to hear someone from group 2 kind of share what you guys discussed.
Some of what we discussed was the difficulty of putting students in groups right now with trying to follow COVID safe protocols and being able to break those kids into the smaller groups and work with them on at their levels, because we can't really keep them in that close proximity like we once were able to. And then there was somebody else in my group who is doing the concurrent right now, and she talked about the struggles of being able to engage those students as well as those in person, the online versus in person.
Yeah, that is super challenging. I think as we think about the importance of strong instruction and the realities of, you know, the current situation of having interrupted instruction and not being able to put kids sometimes in groups where we know that they would do best, can be really challenging. And I know as educators, we've had to come up with some extremely creative ways the last couple of school years of how we're still giving strong instruction to students in safe ways. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend to be the expert on how to make that happen. But I do recognize that those are challenges to implementing strong instruction, and they're a reality. I think there are still ways that we can definitely do those things for sure. We just have had to come up with a lot of creative solutions. So thank you for sharing. We are going to move now into away from strong instruction, and now we're going to look into deep engagement. So we have gone through high expectations, we've gone through grade level, grade appropriate assignments, and we've gone through the strong instruction piece. And now we're going to explore the last component, which is deep engagement. And we're actually going to look at a couple different components of the Nmis. And those two pieces are going to be the student discourse guide and the CLR guide. And we're going to look at how those two pieces can help boost student engagement. But in the chat right now, I'd just like you to define, what do you think? Actually, sorry, don't put it in the chat yet. I'm going to have you hold on to it for a second, and then I'm going to have you put it in the chat. But think about it for a second. How do you define student engagement? And be ready to share in just a moment, because we're going to use those definitions on the next couple slides. How do you define student engagement? So at Tntp, we define student engagement as students enjoying what they're doing, finding it interesting. They concentrate deeply, and they find it worthwhile. So when students have engaging experiences, they fit all of these 4 pieces. So what I want us to do in just a moment, hang on one second, is we're going to think about your definition of student engagement, and I want you to compare it to ours. The thing with this piece right here with student engagement is that to really gauge student engagement, you have to ask students what they're feeling about the lesson, how they're understanding the content that's in front of them. We can't just walk into a room and assume. We actually have to ask them things. So questions like, were you enjoying class? Were you bored? Were you focused? All of these pieces are actual questions that you may have someone ask if we were gauging student engagement in a classroom. So when we measure student engagement, we're looking at kids are reporting their experiences as interesting, enjoyable, they are concentrating deeply on them, and they have meaningful connection or importance in their outside lives. Now, what I want you to do is think through what you said student engagement was and compare it to the definition I have here. How is it similar? How is it different? Just take a moment to think about that. And then we're going to move on to the couple pieces of NMIS that I want to highlight for you. Okay, so hopefully you had some time to reflect on those definitions. I'm going to highlight a couple different pieces for you today in the NMIS. The first thing I want you to see is the culturally and linguistically responsive instruction guide that is in your third grade NMIS. It's also in every single one of the NMIS, no matter, regardless of content. So each one of these will have a section for culturally and linguistically responsive instruction. And the reason why we're looking at these pieces here is because we know that when students find value in the work that they're doing, both in and outside the classroom, they're much more likely to master that content and carry it with them long term. So you'll see here, there's two components to it. There's one that's relevance to families and communities, and one that's cross-curricular connections. And we actually, somebody touched earlier on the importance of cross-curricular connections. But that's here in the NMIS as well. So the relevance to family and communities, it really requires teachers to find relevance of mathematics outside the classroom and connect specifically to families and communities of the students in their classroom. And thinking about the varied and different unexpected ways that they can use mathematics in their own homes and lives. And we know that this is really going to help create that bridge between school and home and really increase student engagement when students feel like they're represented in the learning, that their experiences are valid in the learning, all of these pieces. The second piece you're going to see here is the cross-curricular connection. So New Mexico defines cross-curricular connections as any connection of two or more areas of study made by the teacher or the students within structure of a subject. So the purpose of this is to plan cross-curricular connections in a way that brings relevance to math outside of just your math class, right? Anytime that you can bring in concepts, bring math concepts into things like literature, into science, it really just strengthens students' understanding of math and helps them to apply it to real world situations. The second piece that I want to highlight here for you guys is the student discourse guide, and this is also in the NMIS. The piece that we really want students to engage in math is not just doing the math, but also discussing the math. So this guide, it provides educators with suggested student discourse questions about mathematic materials and concepts, and it gives you the option to purposefully implement classroom discourse. And what this does is it helps students activate their own funds of knowledge, excuse me, their own funds of knowledge, and to kind of refine their own mathematical understanding by discussing it with their peers, discussing it with the teacher, that kind of thing. So I'm going to walk you through a couple of strategies that are actually presented in the teacher move or in the student discourse guide that are teacher moves. So on this next page, you'll see it here. So there's three here that I want to highlight. The first one is revoicing. So these pieces right here, if I were going into a classroom and I was looking for teacher moves to promote student discourse, this is what I would be looking for, right? These are the things I want to actually be happening in the classroom. When we're thinking about revoicing, we're looking at the teacher is repeating some of what the student is saying, then asking the student to respond to verify if that's correct or not. So this is what it would look like. The student could clarify their own thinking. They are helping students follow along with the conversation. They're making students' ideas available to others. This is what this piece, this revoicing piece, does for students in the classroom. Another component is the repeating and restating. And here is where the teacher pushes a student to put what they hear from other students in their own words. And so this just helps students really highlight their listening skills. It It helps students to kind of differentiate between what is the really important stuff that's worth emphasizing when you're listening to somebody talk, and grabbing those like key pieces. And then the final move here is the reasoning piece. And then this piece encourages students to respond in a way where they're agreeing or disagreeing with a student, but not just agreeing or disagreeing, but also providing an explanation of why they agree or disagree. And we just know that when we're pushing students to really participate in discourse in any kind of content, it's really just going to push their thinking to another level. It's going to push their engagement to another level. It's going to push that ownership of learning back on them to be able to explain and discuss their learning with the teacher, with a peer, any of those pieces. And so this is why the student discourse guide is going to be so crucial when you're thinking about how you're promoting discourse in math. Any questions about those key pieces before we move on to this next piece? Okay, we're going to move on to the section called VAB. So this stands for Validate, Affirm, Build, and Bridge. And this is an extension of still being in that CLR guide. But the goal of this is to, excuse me, the goal of this is to create a framework to help validate and affirm and build and bridge from students' home lives to the content that they're seeing in the classroom. And so the validation is making the home culture and language legitimate. While the affirmation is making it clear that the home culture and language are positive assets rather than negative negative pieces. It also is the effort to reverse any negative stereotypes that could be part of non-dominant cultures that other people could see in non-dominant cultures. So this is the goal of this, is to build a bridge and to connect with students' homes, but also to reverse some negative stereotypes. And then the final two pieces you're going to see is the building and bridging. And this is the extension of the validation and affirmation piece. By building and bridging, students learning, you are toggling their understanding between home culture and linguistic behaviors and school culture and linguistic behaviors, and you're kind of melding the two of them. This is especially important when you're thinking about how the home culture and language might be different than the dominant school culture and language. And so you're finding places to integrate the two of them in a way that makes the student more successful in school and makes them feel like what they're bringing to the table is a positive and worthwhile experience. So I'm going to take a moment. I know that's a lot of information. Take a moment to look at the examples here on the screen of what the validate, affirm, build, and bridge piece actually looks like. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to read those. Okay, we're going to move on to the last piece here that I want us to look at in the Nmis here. So this is an additional resource. The Nmis math document, it provides student engagement guidance and it optimizes teacher learning that is grounded in the UDL framework. So these engagement components here can be found on the resources page on the Nmis math website. So it's free access for anybody, but I think these pieces are just an awesome extra piece that you can use to boost student engagement. So it's a lot of information on this page. What I want to do is I'm going to give you, it's 11:57, so I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to just look over the sections that are highlighted in green here on the slide. And then I want you to connect the strategies to your definition of student engagement that we talked about at the very beginning of this section. And then you can reflect either in the chat or on your own, but I want you to spend some time looking at this. I'm also going to put the link in the chat for you. Again, we're just taking a couple minutes to look at the sections here highlighted in green and connect those strategies to your own definition of student engagement. And I also put the link in the chat for you if you want to look at the actual document. I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds to look at these strategies and connect them to your definition that you provided earlier. Okay, so we're going to move on now from the two learning pieces that we had today, and we're going to move into the application piece. So we're going to connect the learning that we did this morning to some current practices, and the rest of the time today, we're going to spend in mostly work time. I saw a couple of people said that they lost access to the Google folder. Kanika, do you think you could put the Google folder in the chat again for everyone? Because you guys are going to need it in just a second. Okay, so we're going to move into the learning piece today. Or sorry, we're going to move away from the learning piece and we're going to move into the actual application piece of our content. Okay, so we've covered so much today. And what I want you to do is actually be able to apply that to a future lesson that you're going to implement in the next week or two. Thank you, Kanika. So at the bottom of your note catcher, which is in the Google folder, okay, you're going to find a template for evaluating a lesson using the metrics we've discussed today. You're not going to have time to do all of the template, so I would just focus on the section that resonated most with you today. So definitely don't feel like you have to do the whole thing, but I would also suggest saving a copy of it so you can use it for future lessons. But it looks like this right here where it says modifying a future lesson. So pull that up, definitely save it for future reference. And we're going to work on a lesson that you are actually going to be implementing in the next week or so. So take some time right now. I'm not going to put us in breakout rooms just yet because I want everyone to have access to that Google folder first. But in just a moment, I'm going to put us in breakout rooms. Go ahead and figure out which lesson or activity you want to pull. And then we're going to spend some time looking at those pieces. Are there any questions before we begin? Okay, Kanika put that Google folder back in the chat, so feel free to pull that up and you can pull up that, that guided notes piece, and it's at the very bottom of the guided notes piece. What I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to let us work independently for the next about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll come together at the very end. I'm going to stay here. My microphone will be on mute and my camera will be off, but if you need something, just let me know. I'm happy to come off mute and help you out. And Kanika can also answer any questions that you have in the chat. And feel free to turn your camera off if you'd like to during work time. That's totally fine. I'm gonna put a link in the chat. I forgot to add this earlier, but I know some of you may not have access to the NMIS for your particular grade level. I know we've been looking at third grade, so I'm gonna put a link in the chat. This will take you to the NMPED website. And you can find your specific grade level there. If you scroll down, it'll take you to that specific grade level NMIS. And then I know that some people were asking about where the lesson rubric piece here, where it says applying our learning, where that is. It's in the section that says guided notes. Make sure you make a copy of the guided notes. But it's in that guided notes section and you scroll all the way to the bottom. Okay, thank you guys so much for engaging in that independent work time. I hope that was valuable for you and that you were able to kind of put the pieces together of the things that we worked on today. As you're finishing up, I wanted to bring us back together really quickly. Sorry for those of you that I made panic when I said 12:20. You're not going to be out here for another hour. I apologize. We're going to wrap up in just a minute or two, but I wanted to take a look back at the things that we accomplished today. And so we went over the key tenets of accelerated learning. That's what we did at the first point this morning. Then we spent the bulk of our time today really examining those 4 key resources of the opportunity myth, and we connected the Nmis support to that accelerated learning piece. And then this last bit of time that we spent the last 20 minutes in was really just taking those pieces of learning that we did this morning and applying that to your actual lessons and things that you teach. And so what I want you to do as we move forward in our work in Roswell is take the pieces that we showed you today. Feel free to use those in your own work. Those are available to all of you. Again, those tools are there for you as a tool. They're not meant to be something that you're required to do or anything like that unless something changes on your campus-specific initiatives. But from our perspective, those are tools that we want to add to your toolbox to make those 4 components of the opportunity myth actually happening in your classroom. And so today, before we leave, I wanted to highlight what are the key things that we're going to be looking at when we meet next time. So on October 15th, we're going to be looking at 3 major topics. The first one is prioritizing the most critical prerequisite skills. So we talked about that a little bit when we were going through and looking at just-in-time instruction in that learning acceleration mindset. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more next time when we meet. We're also going to be looking at data analysis and looking at the current state data and thinking about what challenges and bright spots are already there in your data, and then how we can use Nmis to support those pieces. And then the last thing we're going to be looking at next time is authentic engagement to support student learning. And so really today was kind of that baseline piece. We wanted to introduce you to those tools because we're going to dig into it even more next time. So don't worry if it still feels a little bit overwhelming in the moment. I know it was a ton of information today, and I don't necessarily expect you to walk away experts after 3 hours of working with a tool. So you're going to have more time to dig in. You're going to have more time to apply. Today was really that baseline understanding and that getting our feet wet with the concepts. So if you don't have any other questions, I'm going to give you guys a chance to go back and sign in. Remember that since this is a paid session, you will need to make sure that you confirm your attendance to receive that pay. And we want to make sure that everybody who attended gets that. So please take some time right now to either use the QR code, or I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the chat again for you. And just click that link and then fill out that information there. If you have any issues signing in, please go ahead and reach out to, I believe, Brandon, Kanika, I could be wrong about who should they reach out to if they're having any issues with signing in. Could you just put the email in the chat? You can reach out to whoever Kanika highlights in the chat here if you have any issues with signing in or signing out. And then the final thing that I wanted to highlight is if you have time today, I would really appreciate it if you could fill out the survey. It helps us to make sure that your sessions are useful and that we are making adjustments based on your needs. So we really take it seriously and we really want your feedback. So please take some time today to do that survey if you can. And other than that, you are welcome to go. And we are so happy that you spent some of your Saturday with us. I know your time is really precious as educators, and we so appreciate any time that you spent with us today. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to Kanika. She just put her email in the chat, so feel free to save that if you need it. If you have any questions, Kanika and I will be on here for the next few minutes. And if not, have a wonderful weekend and afternoon. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining. Do you have any other questions or anything else you need from us before we go today? Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to go ahead and close up our session for today, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.